you very much, first of all, for accepting to be part of this thesis defense. It is very nice of you, and I hope that you enjoyed this task. Yeah. I don't know, maybe because we don't know each other, yeah, and didn't have opportunity to chat before. Maybe just to tell a few words about ourselves. So I am a mentor, Goran Knežević, of this thesis. I am teaching psychology of individual differences here in Belgrade University, but also participate in some other courses, mostly devoted to statistics and multivariate analysis. So please, Professor Chabrol, maybe you can tell a few sentences.
Yes, I am a child psychiatrist, and I'm still practicing intensively psychotherapy of child, adolescent, and young adults. I've been working in a psychiatric hospital for 20 years, and now I am finishing my career as a professor of psychopathology in Toulouse. I have a little team working with me on personality disorders in young adults, and we have worked on psychopathy a lot these last years.
So you have clinical experience also?
Yeah.
Yeah. Unlike us. Okay, Iris, please, can you tell a few words about yourself?
Yes, so my name is Iris. I'm an associate professor of social psychology at the University of Belgrade. And I guess, I mean, my expertise here would be maybe the broader social context of the whole project. And also, I've studied implicit measures of attitudes, and basically, I kind of figure as a methodological expert, maybe to help with Tara's defense. So that's my role, I guess, in this committee.
Okay. Slobodan, please, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Slobodan Markovic. It's my nickname, Fila, on your presentation. It's not my official name. I am teaching sensation and perception. So, but I am not a complete stranger here, because I am teaching also motivation and emotion, and my expertise is psychological aesthetics, psychology of art, and it is closely related to the role of affective processes in aesthetic appreciation and so on. And I think that this is the reason why I'm here in this board, this committee. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Janko.
Hi, my name is Janko Međudović. I'm a senior research associate at the Institute of Criminological and Sociological Research here in Belgrade. I study dark traits, among other things, and I'm especially interested in psychopathy and sadism. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Now let's proceed this way. There is some kind of standards in these thesis defenses in Belgrade University, and these standards assume disentangling the role of mentor from the role of the president of the committee. So basically, I should be silent during the defense, and everything should be led by president of the committee. So I suggest president of the committee to be Iris Žeželj.
I agree.
From now, if she accepts, she will lead the whole process. This process, and Iris will explain what this process assumes. Yeah. So I'm giving floor to Iris.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't think we need to be, I mean, as formal as we are in when we have audience and stuff like that, but we will still follow the procedure. So I will briefly present Tara's biography and contributions of her PhD thesis. And then I will give floor to her to present the results, right? Are we still going to do that? Yes? Yep. Even though there is no audience. Goran?
Yes, I think that
Yes,
it is
okay,
kind
okay.
of obligatory
So,
part too.
and then, yes, I assume it's obligatory to do so. And then we can ask questions to Tara. And at one point we will have a brief closed discussion. We will come back and to announce whether Tara has successfully defended her thesis. So that's basically the procedure. So I'm starting with the very short biography of Tara. She graduated from the University of Belgrade in 2012, where she also defended her master thesis in research psychology under the supervision of Professor Slobodan Markovic, who is still in the committee of this defense. In 2015, she enrolled in the PhD program in psychology of individual differences, where she focused on individual differences in dark personality traits and antisocial behavior. She's been a researcher in the Laboratory of Experimental Psychology and Laboratory for Studying Individual Differences. And she was really active researcher. She took part in several international projects. And she's also quite prolific for this academic stage, I would say, because she has already published 5 papers, international and local academic journals, and presented her work in a number of conferences. So Tara will present her PhD thesis in a few moments, and I will just briefly highlight its scientific contributions. Starting from conflicting findings on emotional processes in psychopathic individuals and basically lack of research on such processes in sadistic ones, she aimed to differentiate the two. So she conducted quite ambitious multi-method studies, which supported her key hypotheses about different relations of two constructs, psychopathy and sadism, with an ability to recognize emotional states in others, as well as explicit and implicit reactions to violence. Apart from being important in their own right, these results can help tailor programs aimed at reducing antisocial behaviors. So having all this in mind, the committee concluded that this dissertation closely followed the design which was pre-registered and defended, and that it represents an original piece of scientific work, and thus that all conditions for its oral defense are met. So Tara, you will have, did you agree on the timing? So 30 minutes, 20 minutes?
I will try
Tara,
to. I will. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I will try the 30 minutes. I
To
can
be
make it.
brief?
I can. I can try to make it shorter. Okay.
Okay. So you aimed for?
30-ish minutes.
Okay.
But I can try
I
to
mean,
go faster because you already know most of the
okay.
things.
Okay. I mean, it would be. It's good to hear you, nevertheless. So just take your time, and we will be patient. So after that, we will have the discussion, and then you know how the next steps go. So I will now give floor to you to present the thesis.
Yeah, I just have a couple of technical things. So first, I am using free version of Zoom, and if you are aware of how that functions, we only have 40 minutes of time before the meeting stops, and then I have to restart it. I don't know.
Will it still be like this, even if it's only 5 of us? It's sometimes.
I think when it's over 2 individuals, it usually requires you to stop the meeting and start it again. But that's not difficult. You just click on the same link.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. And I also have a big screen, so you might think I'm not looking at you. My camera is here, so just so you know. Okay, I'm supposed to share my screen now. Just a moment. Let's see. Just a second. Okay. Do you see?
Nope, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, just a second. Okay, that's the 2. Let's see.
Okay.
We see sea and some rocks. Is that what we're supposed to see?
Just a second.
Yeah, it's okay. We see the
Do you
presentation.
see the whole thing?
Yeah, yeah.
I just need to somehow, okay, you're down there. All right. Okay, so today we're going to talk just briefly about some empirical background and theoretical background of the study. So in our study, we focused on psychopathy and sadism, as you know. Psychopathy is a constellation of traits that includes interpersonal affective characteristics, so manipulativeness, superficial affect, lack of empathy, lack of guilt, and also lifestyle traits, as stated in Hare's model, disinhibition, impulsiveness, inability to establish long-term relationships, and also one trait that is not present in all models is antisociality, is proclivity towards antisocial behavior. You will see that in our study, we weren't focused on this because, of course, we were studying it in student population, general population. And psychopathy, as you know, is related to a number of, we can say, detrimental behaviors, from instrumental and reactive aggression, and also instrumental as proactive. Number of delinquent behaviors, criminal recidivism rates in of course studied in penal populations, and as we know, there are certain characteristics that regard emotions in psychopathy. So first component would be deficits in recognizing and perceiving and recognizing negative emotions, primarily fear and sadness. So that was empirically confirmed on numerous occasions, and some studies also show broader deficits, problems in recognizing positive, what we call positive emotions, such as happiness, joy. But there's also a second component to this, that is deficit in generating negative emotions, primarily fear and sadness. And we know from so-called integrated emotional system by Blair that basically they have issues in generating fear and also recognizing and perceiving fear and sadness in other individuals, and that might lead to violent behavior or basically any type of behavior that inflicts damage on other individuals. But there are numerous of approaches and methodologies used in studying psychopathy or emotions in psychopathy, like aversive conditioning, where they have more difficulty and also difficulty in learning from punishment. They also have physiological differences, where they have reduced physiological responses to, for example, some fear-inducing situations. They also have different responses to violence, or even they say from studies using implicit measures or implicit cognition that they actually have weaker association between unpleasant emotions and violent words, let's say, and which might represent their reduced response to violence, which might lead to further detrimental behavior. Sadism, on the other hand, is a trait that's similar, but not the same. It's enjoyment and humiliation of other individuals, whether that's on physical or emotional level. Some say also in establishing dominance, but some authors emphasize the appetitive motivation. But basically, sadism, the end mean is to torture other individuals and obtain positive gratification from it. And sadism is also related to numerous different behaviors, and especially studied in the last 10 to 15 years. Now in general population and community samples. So from very similar as psychopathy, but also participating in cruel activities that result in obtaining pleasure, which they think is then reinforced. Then the new and modern ways of channeling like internet trolling or cyberbullying and violent video gameplay. So what's important for us here is the emotional aspect, is the pleasure that they obtain from suffering and probably from observing it, and that there are studies, although rare, saying that individuals with increased sadism, in this case, this was a criminal sample, that they exhibit hypersensitivity to other people's pain, and that left amygdala as the center of reward is also activated when they observe other individuals. And now famous study by our committee member also shown that on visual material that when observing pleasant social interactions, they also, individuals with greater sadism also have decreased positive emotions, and vice versa, when observing violent social interactions experience increased positive emotions, which is in line with the assumptions from prior studies. Psychopathy and sadism they generally share, like other dark traits, lack of empathy and insensitivity, and they are associated with different types of violence. However, that motivation for violence or aggression might be different for these two traits, where we know that with sadism comes positive affect as they inflict damage. With psychopathy, there is probably, as we know, that superficial affect or absence of it. Also not normal pattern of emotions, but slightly different. But they also have certain goals they want to achieve, and they usually harm other individuals to achieve those goals, not to achieve pleasure from hurting, usually. So our research goals were to use several different methodologies to study these aspects of psychopathy and sadism. So first, I will say that I excluded many things from the dissertation because it's just too much. So from the area of emotion perception, we used accuracy in perceiving emotional expressions. So we wanted to examine the relations of these traits with accuracy in perceiving expressions. Then from when it comes to emotional responding, we wanted to study how psychopathy and sadism relate to positive or negative responses to different types of stimuli, in this case, violent and peaceful dynamic stimuli. And then we wanted to study also that aspect of, we can say, social cognition, which is somehow on the crossroads between, that's basically implicit emotional processing. That's how we call it here in the paper. We will see what tasks we use for that. So when it comes to measure of psychopathy, so we, of course, use the university student sample. We conducted the study fully online on the assessment, total assessment platform. But we used, in this case, psychopathy measure, psychopathic personality trait scale, which is relatively new scale. And it actually excludes antisocial behavior. But it includes so-called egocentricity, which was present in previous scales, but here is emphasized as a specific subscale. So basically covers affective and cognitive responsiveness, interpersonal manipulation, and egocentricity. When it comes to sadism measures, we use the ones that are used the most popular ones. So short sadistic impulse scale, or so-called hurting scale that only has one score, and vast or varieties of sadistic tendencies. Well, we have two scores, the core sadism, but also vicarious. We weren't in these analyses focused on vicarious, just the core sadism. And we also have immorality questionnaire, which we extracted, actually we used the measure of sadism, but we also used it for that measure of brutality we used in some of the analysis. That measure we actually wanted to extract because we thought that the way the items were phrased in this questionnaire, that will maybe capture some broader differences or basically try to capture greater variance. Whether we were successful, we'll see. And then on to tasks. So emotion perception tasks. I didn't put the hypothesis. I put the hypothesis for later, just for clarity. The tasks we use for emotion perception was the task identification of emotional expression by Wilhelm. They wanted to create a more complex task because sometimes in the field of emotion perceptions, the tasks for recognizing or perceiving seem too easy. Therefore, they wanted to create more complex tasks. So one of those we used where a participant basically had to choose the emotion that's on top or bottom, and choose the name of the emotion. Of course, we here calculated accuracy measures. And the next task that we used in regards to emotional responses is the explicit emotional experience of dynamic stimuli. That's how I call it, although that's just us creating a task through ratings of video stimuli. These video stimuli were selected in pilot study, as you know, and they were selected from a big database that's open source. That is also a benefit, but also a drawback because they are not the best quality, but the best we could get. This is one example of peaceful stimuli. It's cutting. I don't know if you can see it well, but we had peaceful and pleasant human interactions, and also we had violent and scenes that depict physical abuse and so on. Yes, I hope you saw that. So they were evaluated on type 1 Likert scales, and you will see later how we formed the scores. These are the emotions that were included on the list of emotions that were included in assessment of the stimuli. Okay. And the aspect of implicit associations, we in this study used the so-called sorting paired features task, which is a relative of the IAT famous task that basically measures implicit associations or automatic responses to emotionally saturated stimuli. In this case, we used stimuli that were validated in the prior study by colleague Medjidovic, but he used them in IAT task. So this task, in the end, you calculate 4 scores based on 4 different situations. So you have here incongruent and congruent conditions, where incongruent is basically when you have peaceful and pleasant, and violent and unpleasant. So the image and emotion that it depicts the image are are just in discrepancy basically, and peaceful, pleasant, violent, unpleasant. So you basically have 4 scores that you get. What is the task of the participant? The task is to categorize the image and the descriptive word at the same time into one of the 4 corner categories. And that way you measure reaction response time, and that is basically your output. So our assumptions were that psychopathy will have negative correlations with perception accuracy of negative emotions, whereas sadism will correlate positively, which was a brave assumption. We were relying on the previous studies somewhat, whereas with sadism, it wasn't really certain because there isn't much empirical data. when it comes to emotional responses, we mostly assumed our hypotheses were focused on sadism because we thought, since we used measure that is different from prior measures, we were not sure whether we will capture the effects that were prior, because our measure excluded antisocial tendencies and it also wasn't as contaminated with sadistic aspects like revenge, brutality. And for implicit associations, we also, these are very long, assume that sadism will correlate positively with reaction time of pairing positive emotions and nonviolent, and negative emotions and violent stimuli, as well as that it will negatively correlate with reaction time of pairing positive emotions, violent stimuli, and negative emotions and nonviolent, or what we call incongruent stimuli. Very similar motivation was behind this as the prior hypothesis. I will just shortly, I will just show you, we have a lot of, as you saw, analysis. I just added this as preliminary, how we got to the scores that we used for our emotional responsive test. So we basically formed two factors, not formed, but they formed negative and positive emotions. And we further use those in our analysis. And also we did manipulation check for explicit emotional responses for stimuli and implicit emotional associations, where we did get differences between peaceful stimuli that are paired with pleasant words and violent stimuli with pleasant words. Okay, so first part is the same as we presented in the introduction. So emotion perception is the first thing we did. And this is the correlation matrix between dark traits and emotion perception accuracy. So you can see generally that for us, the most important measure is the negative emotions accuracy, but there are also some specific correlations between dark traits and aspects of perception accuracy. For example, affective responsiveness and cognitive responsiveness from psychopathy negatively relate to accuracy of negative emotions, surprise, disgust, sadness, surprise, even happiness. So these are just bivariate correlations. So next is the prediction of identification accuracy based on traits. And you can see here that affective responsiveness of psychopathy negatively predicts emotions identification accuracy. And also you can see here positive prediction of sadism. Also, you will see through these analysis, in some places, there's also the trait of brutality. In the upper table, I added only the analysis we did without it, but when it was added, this trait also predicted this identification accuracy negatively. So also when it comes to specific emotions, we have positive prediction by interpersonal manipulation, negative by brutality, and also what's important for us also is sadism, which predicts disgust identification accuracy positively, and you see affective responsiveness that predicts it negatively. So basically what can be said is that individuals with pronounced sadism and lower brutality are more accurate when identifying negative emotions when we include brutality. But when it comes to basic analysis, we can say that lower affective responsiveness, higher sadism predict negative emotions accuracy. Okay, next is also analysis regarding emotional responses. So this is the second, let's say, aspect that we studied, and those are the responses to those dynamic stimuli. So you can see that we got all sorts of correlations that different measures. You can see that here in the correlation, bivariate correlations, we use different scales of sadism, but as I forgot to mention, in regressions and predictions, we actually used extracted score with the largest amount of explained variance from these scales. So that's the score we used from sadism, because it would be too messy if we used everything. But as you can see here, higher sadism associated with higher positive emotions to violent stimuli and negative emotions to peaceful stimuli. And we have opposite pattern for congruent responses. So we have the higher sadism is the trait, the less intense are positive emotions to peaceful stimuli, negative emotions to violent stimuli. Also, we have patterns that are obtained for psychopathic traits, where we see that affective responsiveness, cognitive responsiveness have negative relations with positive emotions to peaceful and negative to violent stimuli. It's a little frozen. And then when it comes to prediction, we can see here that one consistent thing when it comes to both sadistic and psychopathic trait is in sadism, that is greater positive emotions to violent stimuli. And also we can see cognitive responsiveness, which is basically a negative predictor. Yes, and one other is also the trait of interpersonal manipulation. Okay, and another aspect that was important to us, and that's the role of implicit associations. So we will see, and we can discuss it, what actually does this measure mean. We obtained two significant correlations here. When it comes to the specific scales of sadism, that is the hurting scale of sadism, or the one that with unitary score. And we can say that basically individual with pronounced sadism, but also the ones with pronounced egocentricity, this is psychopathic trait, they form stronger associations between violent imagery and pleasant terms, or terms representing pleasant emotions. I need to click harder. Okay. And when it comes to prediction, here we see that actually brutality as a trait, as a score we extracted, is a positive predictor, especially when it comes to peaceful unpleasant and peaceful pleasant pairings. That means that they actually have longer reaction times or weaker associations between violence and pleasant emotions. And then also we have egocentricity in opposite direction. One important thing that we thought that it's important to include is, since we know that psychopathy and sadism share significant amount of variance, it was important for us to extract the variance or get the unique variance of sadism and see how that works in prediction. So in this case, we tried another approach and also in a way obtained a profile that's related to these traits. And we can see two important aspects regarding psychopathy. So that's response to explicit dynamic stimuli. And also we can see certain association that are implicit on implicit level. But as we know, and we saw from the dissertation, that the scores in this task, implicit task, are very highly correlated. That could lead to collinearity between the predictors. So when we actually did the prediction of just general psychopathy, we only obtained the result that that it predicts violent, pleasant stimuli associations. And also when we predict a unique variance of sadism, so basically the one that's not explained by psychopathy, we get two important things, and that is greater negative emotions perception accuracy, and also greater positive emotions to violence increased. So what we can conclude from this is that we did obtain some general relations. We can't say that all the relations were really robust. We did predict that psychopathy will correlate negatively to perception accuracy of negative emotions, whereas sadism positively. In general, we did obtain that pattern, especially when it comes to traits of affective responsiveness, which represent low empathy. And in sadism, we saw that there are instances of better accuracy of identifying emotions. So what could that mean? So in our study, we also had scores for different emotions. And one of the important findings is also regarding sadness, because sadness is an emotion that's important for the mentioned integrated emotional system model, which says that psychopathic individuals have difficulties recognizing fear and sadness. We did not obtain a very consistent lack of fear perception. But we did for other negative emotions and even happiness or joy, some call it. So this is a finding that points to some broader deficit in perception of emotions rather than just sadness or just fear. But as we know, that can also be explained by different factors, such as type of task used, type of stimuli used. Why we didn't obtain that result of lack of lower accuracy in fear recognition, and also type of stimuli. For example, when you use morphing stimuli, where you morph the face from neutral to the emotion, you obtain those results easier. Those studies actually obtain. So you have different methodological reasons why something might be different, and also the studies that studied also fear. A large number of studies are also done on different clinical forensic samples. So there are many potential explanations for this. We can speculate. When it comes to sadism, we did confirm our assumptions. We didn't have so much of empirical background, but we did confirm the basic assumption we have about it, that they might be better because they are more motivated. They have more. It's more useful for individuals that are high on this trait, unlike people who are more psychopathic. And further, when it comes to explicit emotional responses, I will just say general pattern, something that you can really extract from the findings is that we assumed that we will not get any relations. We were wrong. In psychopathy, we did obtain a pattern of decreased negative emotions to violence and increased negative emotions to peaceful stimuli, which is a strange emotional profile. On the other hand, what's very expected, what we did expect, and what's a feature of sadism is greater positive emotions to violence stimuli. So when it comes to psychopathy, this in a way goes with previous findings, such as reduced responsiveness to disturbed stimuli and so on, which also generates an empirically proven greater proactive aggression and so on. There are numerous findings that confirm this. But we did obtain an interesting profile when it comes to interpersonal manipulation and egocentricity, which have a very similar pattern to sadism, which is interesting because interpersonal manipulation itself is actually shares significant amount of variance with sadism, and sadism is also it's basically the core feature. In order to hurt people, you need to be able to be a little bit manipulative as well. And when it comes to sadism, yes, we confirmed our basic assumption is that they do experience positive emotions when observing individuals in distress. However, we know that in our case, it was only observing. It wasn't active participation, which is one of the drawbacks of the study. And we see that there is some kind of a different profile for sadism and psychopathy, where if we obtain pleasure from distress and we actually have motivation to hurt others, whereas in psychopathy, that's basically an issue with experiencing negative emotions. So there is that aberrant profile and probably leads to being careless and inflicting damage on other individuals. When it comes to implicit associations, we did obtain some relations, as you've heard, but it is a question of what actually those relations mean. What is the nature of this measure? We did get certain results that are slightly different from studies on inmates that got a result of diminished unpleasant responses to violence. But we used different sample. We also used different measures. We also included sadism. So there are many aspects to consider. When it comes to our limitations, and there are many, so first thing is the size of the sample. Of course, that's always the problem with such studies. But also we have a different structure of the sample. We only use university students. It's mostly female students. Also, when it comes to measures, we use limited number of tasks. Even the authors of the tasks, for example, for emotion perception, Wilhelm, they recommend using multiple tasks as a battery, where we use 3 tasks in total, but for every domain, they recommend many tasks. So this is also a drawback, but due to technical difficulties, we cannot. Also, different stimuli might be also good. There are certain limitations to implicit measure itself. I'm just naming all the potential problems from all the aspects of the study. We also administered everything online. We administered the tasks that are very sensitive, which might lead to skewing the data in certain ways. Also attention and so on. So there are many potential difficulties. But what's important is what would be recommended for future studies is stricter design, stricter conditions, especially if we are using tasks such as we used. And also important is to control for certain external variables. For example, general mental ability was studied by Wilhelm, the author of the task, and they actually concluded that the variance goes that basically can be explained by general mental ability, the variance in emotion perception tasks. So that's also a thing that needs to be considered in the future, maybe with some more specific studies. There are also executive functions or measures that are related to that. And also, how does this reflect into real behaviors? Because we basically study some symbolic representation and not real behaviors. So I will just quickly go through the second study, which was a diary study, and to be honest, this was mostly a pilot study that we did. You know that based on the sample size and it was a smaller scale. We were interested in how these traits are exhibited in everyday circumstances, and whether the people who are characterized with certain traits are actually more prone to find themselves in certain situations or rate situations in certain ways. There are some studies that did the similar thing by Pilch 2020, but they didn't include sadistic tendencies. So we wanted to see how psychopathy and sadism relate to everyday aspects of everyday situations that people find themselves in, emotional hurt of another person they interacted with, but this is all subjective measures. This is not objective. So this is estimated by the participant. And emotional experience in everyday situations. We also wanted to see if sadism has some moderating role, whether if another person was hurt, they experienced positive affect. And we used all the same measures, but one thing that was different is the reconstruction method, and one type of ambulatory assessment that helps you reconstruct your day and activities from the previous day. It is consisted of 2 packets, they call it. So one is given to participant to describe their day just for recollection purposes, and another for standardized ratings, or just saying with whom, where they were, and so on, plus added measures. And that's, in this case, diamond scale. We use certain aspects of the scale that we thought might relate to dark traits or sadism and psychopathy, and also measures of emotional hurt, the extent to which they rate the other person who was emotionally hurt, and also emotional experience or ratings on emotions in those situations. We assumed that both sadism and psychopathy will correlate with different types of characteristics, well, we can say negative aspects of situations. So whether the deception is present in a situation, negativity, so negative emotions are present, and adversity. So basically, negative aspects of situations they find themselves in. Also, that it will positively correlate with degree of negative experienced emotions. Psychopathy will not, and emotional hurt of another person. Why? Because we think that for sadism, that's important. And that it might moderate the relationship, as we mentioned before. We used subsample of the prior sample we mentioned. The study was very short, only 2 days, not enough, but it was conducted fully online. So we had basically 20 data points per participant. So you had 10 points per day. And we, because of that, used the multi-level modeling, which is the statistical method when you have nested data or certain measures that are repeated within the participants. I will just shortly, I just added some aspects that are important for psychopathy and sadism. As you read, we did not get any significant relations in terms of psychopathy, but we did when it comes to sadism. So here, basically, these variances come from interclass correlation that tells you what percentage is explained by variance between or within individual, and the reasoning for the multi-level modeling. So we here obtained the positive prediction by sadism of adversity and negativity in situations. So basically, individuals who are higher in sadism rate situations cross-situationally that they find themselves in as higher on adversity and negativity. Also, very similar pattern, sadism as well. Negative emotions that are experienced by the individual, and also greater emotional hurt in interaction with another person. So what that means, they rate another individual as having more distress after they interacted with them. So they are not rating their own emotional pain, but other individuals. So when it comes to our hypothesis, I marked with colors so the ones that are very gray are not confirmed. The ones that are pale, we predicted only, confirmed only role of sadism. So you can see also the description of the situations, what is adversity, what means negativity and deception. So this goes in line with the view sadists have about the world, more pessimistic and their environment. And also they experience more negative emotions across situations, which is related to their negative baseline effectivity, which was attained in prior studies. It is also related to some depressive symptomatology and some aspects of negative feelings, negative affectivity, sadness, loneliness, low self-worth, hopelessness, and so on. And also, when it comes to our assumption about moderating the relationship, we did not capture this effect. However, it is a question why we obtain the result on emotional hurt, whether they're just more perceptive of other people's emotions, whether they overestimate the pain, like some, or pain or distress of others, like some studies show, or they just overstate because they are so involved with other person's suffering, they overstate it. So we don't know that because of the nature of our study and our measures, but that's maybe a nice start. And also when it comes to psychopathy, we did not obtain the expected results. However, as Professor Iris in her comments said, the major drawback and problem here is the smaller number of registered episodes, data points, and also student samples. So we did maybe 67 participants, whereas all other studies that use similar method use many more participants compared to variables, and also much more, a bigger time frame basically, and many more registered episodes. So we can discuss about what are the problems, but generally that's the major issue in this study. And everybody can see that. That's why I call it a pilot study. So yes, that would be it. I took a little longer, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Tara. You were very modest in the presentation, and we will try to make up for it in the discussion. So maybe we could start with Professor Chabrol. Maybe you can ask your questions first, as you are a guest. So maybe.
Yes, yeah.
Is that okay with you?
It's okay. Thank you, Mrs. President. So it is for me an honor and a pleasure to comment on the thesis of Tara Bulut. Her thesis presents two well-designed, well-conducted, and very well-discussed studies, which significantly increase our knowledge on emotional processes in psychopathy and sadism. Do you hear me well?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Method, analysis, and discussion are very sophisticated. The diary study is very innovative and promising. Overall, this is a huge work and an impressive thesis, and Tara should be congratulated for her efforts. This is one of the 3 best theses I have commented in my career. I have only 2 suggestions. Tara shows a variable-centered approach, which yielded interesting results. However, nearly all significant correlations showed small effect size and so weak to modest relationships between emotion variables and dark traits. These weak relationships are not surprising, as the levels of these dark traits are low in the university student population. Likewise, regression analysis showed that dark traits explain a low proportion of the variances in emotional processes, and multi-level models did not confirm several of assumptions. These weak relationships are difficult to interpret, and it is not easy to make inferences about emotional processes among psychopaths and sadists. Tara Bulut has done her best to not get too far from the data. I suggest that comparing a group with a high level of psychopathy and a group with a high level of sadism might show stronger effect size and yield more clinically significant results. So I advise to use a person-centered approach, classifying participants based on psychopathic and sadistic measures. This school identified personality profiles characterized by different levels of psychopathic and sadistic trait. Studying emotional processes differences between this group could help exploring differences between subclinical psychopath and subclinical sadist. The considerable amount of gathered data may allow this analysis. However, concerning the diary study, this person-centered approach will imply a 2-step study. One for identifying participants with subclinical psychopathy or subclinical sadism, and the other for implementing the diary measures. My last suggestion, concerns complexity Tara Bulut has proven that she can successfully manage studies with a very high level of complexity. Another challenge could be to design very simple studies with a high potential for publication in good journals. It is quite another challenge. I think Tara maybe do very good work in this direction, but maybe it is too simple for her. She likes too much complexity and difficulties. Congratulations to Tara and congratulations to directors.
I will try to make everything simple.
Would you like to maybe comment on some of the suggestions?
Oh yes, yes. We did, Gordon, my supervisor, we did some preliminary analysis about clustering participants with certain certain traits that are expressed in certain clusters. So there is some basis in that. So we will definitely do that and expand that further. And regarding what you said, complexity, I agree, and I think that when I look back now, I wouldn't include the second study in the dissertation, to be honest. I would maybe do it as a separate study on the side with the colleagues, but I think I would focus more on doing slightly simpler things, but in more depth. That's for sure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You can always, I mean, we're not so formal, so whenever something pops to mind, you can still ask questions and so on. So, I mean, it's not so rigorous. You can feel free to do so. Yes. Yeah. So, Janko, do you feel like taking over?
Okay, I can take over. So I can concur with Professor Chabrol with his comments, and perhaps provide a little bit more comments on this basis. Firstly, I agree this is a great work. Yeah, the topic was very complex. In fact, the topic is complex conceptually, because psychopathy is not one trait. Psychopathy is a set of traits. And this is the main problem with the dark triad research, dark tetrad research, because they all view psychopathy as a singular trait. And your findings, Tara, are just one of many, many findings showing that indeed these narrow psychopathy traits are in fact functionally different psychological dispositions. So this makes psychopathy complex itself. Fortunately, sadism is a little bit less complex, but the design is complex as well methodologically. So you assess both emotional identification, but emotional production as well. So emotional reactions on stimuli, and in fact some measures with more cognitive aspect like implicit processing of emotion. So a very complex task, and I think it was done very well, in fact excellent, I would say. The data is very interesting and intriguing, and I think there is the data is abundant, and I do think together with Professor Chabrol, this is very important, non-trivial data, which really tells us something more in the field. And I believe that this topic of emotional processing is in fact one of the key topics in the field of dark traits in general. So well done. in one word. Yeah. So of course, there were some things in your thesis that I believe they should be done differently. Yeah. For example, the main thing I would like to comment is the topic is complex, but the thesis could be simpler. So there are levels of complexity in the thesis which could be avoided. For example, you start with very precise, very focused, and even I would say elegant hypothesis. But in your thesis, you go much further from your hypothesis, which makes your thesis on some points quite hard to comprehend and understand. The main problem is involvement of the variables which are not predicted by hypothesis, and in fact which are not the topic of your thesis in the narrow sense. Of course, when we talk about study one, I think about brutality in the first, brutality is the main thing which make not just the thesis itself more complex than it should be, but unfortunately on some places I even suspect that brutality confounded your analysis. For example, in some analysis you've done analysis with and without brutality, which okay, maybe good, but in some analysis you didn't. For example, I wonder, like in the regression analysis, when you predicted implicit emotional responses, where the most important regression model predicts, of course, pleasant emotions on violent stimuli. Here we can see the role of brutality, but if brutality was excluded from the analysis, perhaps sadism or some other trait which is of interest to us could be a significant predictor. This was even more evident in study two, because in study two you have all dark tetrad traits like brutality, and even more trait measures of physiological arousal, etc., which are not simply not the focus of your study, and you don't have a hypothesis for these variables. So they simply made like a study to like a completely different study, like not part of your thesis, like a completely different study. Study is interesting, of course, especially the role of sadism in predicting all of these criteria. It was very interesting for me, but perhaps you should keep your analysis only to sadism and psychopathy, and only to your hypothesis. This is my main impression of what should be done differently. There are some other points in dissertation, like some terminological points and some points regarding the presentation of your results, which perhaps also could be more parsimonious and more done to facilitate comprehension, etc. But those are perhaps more stylistic points. I would like to ask a few questions. Perhaps I have many questions, of course, but I don't want to take so much time. So just two questions, but I'm afraid a little bit like a broad questions. Firstly, I would like if you can tell us, this is something that I missed from your thesis. For example, the last summary chapter in study 1, where you could tell us about, in general, what in what points sadism and psychopathy are similar to each other, and in what points psychopathy and sadism differ from each other. You provide this analysis after every set of emotional measures that you applied, but it would be interesting to see, like, if you can tell us, for example, the whole picture, because, for example, now in your presentation, you said that manipulative traits and egocentrism from psychopathy have similar profile to sadism when we talk about emotional processing. So I'm not sure if we can say this. I think it's a little bit an overstatement, because the similar profile appears only on one type of emotional reaction. So if you can tell us, in your opinion, like in general, what could be the similarities and differences, that is the first question. And the second question is perhaps similar to the point that Professor Chabrol made. I'm also interested in the research in convicts, and we do plan to conduct very similar research in convict samples. So what is your opinion? What would you expect in a sample of convicts? Would it mirror your results, or would some results be different? And would you like apply all of these measures when you, if you would need to study these processes in convicts again? Particularly, I mean SPF task, because in my own opinion, SPF task showed like, I don't know, it didn't tell us almost anything like in your current research. So you obtain only 2 correlations from 36 possible correlations, and those 2 correlations might be completely the result of chance. Yeah, so it might be completely the result of chance. So I didn't think the SPF told us anything about. What do you think about that? Should we continue to apply this test, especially in these samples, like convict samples? Yeah, those are two questions I wanted to ask.
Can I answer the second one first?
Of course.
Well, when it comes to convicts, this was I think that it's even more useful to do similar study with convicts, because it's more of a, let's say, extreme expression, occurrence of these traits, that's for sure. And with the convicts, as you did before, you can also include measures of recidivism in relation to emotional measures, or any other that you can obtain in prison population. And also with prison populations, you can use different instruments, not only the ones we use, but you can use the report measures, right? The rating measure of psychopathy. I don't know which one you would choose in the future. The hairs?
I would never again assess hairs PCLR. It's too much job. It's too much.
Too much, yeah. But when it comes to, I think you are right. There are issues with the SPF. Maybe Professor Iris can help us with that. But the SPF task, first, I've never used it before. Second, I don't think that it was a right way to apply it online. That's also one thing. Second thing is, it wasn't perfectly designed from our end. It wasn't counterbalanced. The stimuli that you see that usually should be. I think that if you apply methodologies like these, they need to be strict. So I think, and also you remember the
Very high correlations we got between the scores.
that might also be a consequence of the way we designed, the way it looked to the participant, the way it was designed, which was a flaw, I have to say, because I didn't have experience with it before. That's one thing that I wouldn't give to convicts. And also its complexity is pretty high, I think. And for me, it seems that IAT, if you have to use a test, that you would apply the test you used before. So implicit association is if you have to decide to use the implicit test. That's what I would say, based on what you obtained in your previous findings and what we did now. If SPF is even more complex and you apply it in those conditions, I think it would be just a word salad, but it would be just a mess. That's one thing.
Excuse me, Tara, if I can just add it. I did comparative analysis in one of my analyses between implicit association test and SPF. And both correlations with the explicit measures were both low, but the higher correlations I obtained with SPF than implicit association test. So if you want to, if you are forced to choose between these two, please use SPF. For sure, you will obtain a little bit stronger correlations. But generally speaking, I think these correlations are, pretty elusive, and generally this paradigm is still, I think, under scrutiny. And basically, when you correlate it with personality measures, if you obtain anything, it is great. It works better in the domain of concrete attitudes toward homosexuals, toward I don't know, minorities, ethnic minorities, whatever.
I mean, I don't know if we are having this discussion now, but yes, I also aimed to ask a couple of questions regarding the implicit measuring and whether it's basically sensitive enough to capture individual differences in the first place. Is it too noisy? When you say it's too complex, do you mean for the participants? Because error rates could tell us something about that. I cannot recall at this point how the error rates were in your study, but
no, I meant if Janko would use SPF in prison population.
So you meant it would be too complex. I mean, that you can empirically see, and there is error rate, so you can say like it was too complex, and you can exclude the participants who were too much. But then again, we can still. I mean, you have 2 out of 36 correlations that I agree completely that might as well be artifacts. So the basic validity issue with all the implicit measures still remains, especially when you measure the associations, the semantic associations, and this is to measure, the idea is to measure implicit emotional processes. So you can still discuss if that's basically what it does, right? I mean, you can share with us your overall opinion of its usefulness, and basically whether you would still continue on that path or you would include something that you might find more informative in your future studies.
Okay, let me go back. Let me go back to Janko's question just quickly. When it comes to prison population, I would definitely, I would love if it would be possible, especially in the context of sadistic trait, to study emotion perception, because
that's one of the things
even emotional responding, so generating emotions, we have some data, but on specifically perceiving emotions in convict population, that's not, I'm not aware of many findings that use specifically tasks in prison populations like that, for sadism, I mean. So that would be extremely interesting. That's something that I would include. Of course, to be very careful with what you use, because obviously these tasks have their setbacks, and also the way Wilhelm recommends using them as a battery, it's not the same as using one task. So that's also, but when it comes to the SPF task, as Professor said, I wouldn't recommend, because I didn't have good experience with it, but maybe IAT measure, but Professor Gordon said differently. So when it comes to the task, that I'm not satisfied with that fully. Emotional responses, so the video stimuli. So we have to balance between being ethical and showing students something that's emotion evoking, but yet not documentary videos. I even got a complaint for these videos from a student. So it was very hard to choose stimuli, but I think with prison population, you might be more free in that sense. That might be interesting. So if I could choose, I would choose some documentary videos or something that's more realistic to induce emotions. Of course, it might be on the edge when it comes to ethics, but that would be better. Whereas we used something that's open source and something that's B-rated movies, you know, which I didn't prefer in the beginning. So in convict population, I think you might be more free to use different types of stimuli. That might be interesting. I don't know what I would add regarding the studies such as these in the prison population, except for adding some variables that are available from such a sample. And you said profile of individuals with high psychopathy and sadism, right? Discrepancies and overlap.
Similarities, yes.
Well, I first would say that the main difference that I still think, or I draw from our data, and not only our data but the previous data, is the one regarding to emotional responding, where the primary characteristic of, and it's most robust, I think, of sadists or individuals with increased sadism is positive emotions to violent stimuli. That's something that's overall their characteristic, and also it's inherent to sadism. Whereas when it comes to psychopaths or psychopathy traits, especially affective and cognitive responsiveness, in this case, our case, we have, we can say, not abnormal, aberrant profile of negative emotions. So when they observe violent stimuli, they have decreased levels of negative emotions. Whereas obviously peaceful stimuli are not something that's really pleasant for them as well. So they have some opposite pattern of experiencing negative emotions. At least that's what I can abstract from the study and in general. But generally, they are more characterized by reduced responses compared to sadistic individuals. So which are characterized by greater positive emotions. And then when it comes to perception of emotions, I'm also looking a little bit at the tables. What generally is the characteristic that we obtain here is that individuals that are sadistic are better at identifying negative emotions. So that's basically what the characteristic is, I would say. Whereas affective responsiveness is the trait that was most consistently, so low empathy, that was also related to perception of negative emotions. It makes them less successful, I'd say. So yes, as I said, that individuals with greater sadism are more prone to observe those cues, and that probably also leads to different motivations for aggressive or for detrimental behavior towards other individuals. Whereas I would say psychopathic individuals are just careless, even, how can we say this? Even do some things unintentionally, hurt other individuals unintentionally. That's what I gather from previous findings and somewhat from ours. When it comes to implicit tests or measure, I can't. It's very hard for me to. I discussed in paper, but it's in generally very hard for me to say I conclude this from those findings, because as we said, those could be artifacts. But these are general conclusions of mine regarding the findings. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Would
great.
you, oh, okay.
Would something else? Yeah.
No, I just wanted to ask Janko, because I always know that he has some better insight. Is there something you would add? You would add to what I said, like in the profiles, is there something that for you that's something that's specific that you would add?
Well, I don't know. There were. Sorry for taking some more time. There was some interesting things for me in your data. For example, both psychopathy and sadism are positively correlated to they need more time to perceive fear, as I recall. But both psychopathy and sadism did not correlate with accuracy in identifying fear, which is very interesting for me. It mirrors some neurobiological findings of activating of certain areas of prefrontal cortex in psychopathy when perceiving emotions, which suggest that psychopaths, because the aberrant functioning of amygdala, need to engage in cognitive processes to overcome their emotional deficiency. So they need more time because they need involvement of cognitive processes, but there is a result because they do not have deficient accuracy in perceiving fear. They are not better as well, but they are not worse. And that is the same pattern. That is the same pattern for psychopathy and sadism. And it was interesting, for example, in emotional reactions to the dynamic stimuli, to the films. There are similarities with between psychopathy and sadism, but of different type. For example, sadism is similar to the lack of cognitive and affective empathy on some stimuli, but it's similar to interpersonal and egocentricity on other stimuli. That is very interesting finding, and conceptually very important finding, because the crucial difference is are the stimuli congruent or incongruent? The similarity exists with some psychopathy traits on congruent stimuli and with others on incongruent stimuli. That is, that piece of evidence alone deserves much attention in explaining, in providing new hypotheses, etc. Very interesting data. I believe it's quite motivating for further thinking about these processes in dark personalities and generating new hypotheses for future research.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so Fila, can you maybe now continue with the questions?
Yes, I am unmuted now. And something for something completely different and coming from very distant field. First, I must agree with all praises to Tara's dissertation, and especially to excellent PowerPoint presentation, which is very smart and elegant. Bravo, Tara, for that.
And a bit long.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat everything that has been said, but I still have to stress a few things. First, I followed the development of this complex study from its very beginning. So I know how much work was behind it, and how much effort Tara invested in all stages of research. And secondly, the text of dissertation itself is almost perfect. Introduction is so comprehensive and exhaustive that probably no single reference was left uncovered. Honestly, I learned a lot myself by reading it, particularly having in mind that I am not from the field in a narrow sense. The description of the research was very clear and detailed, and in the interpretation of the finding, a good balance has been reached between the limitations given by the data and the freedom of generalization. Also, the dissertation is written in a very fluent style. All concept theoretical models, goals, hypotheses, and so on are defined so precisely that the text is read with a great ease. It is for me one of the best indicators that somebody was ready to be promoted in doctoral level. And now thinking about what I could ask Tara, I realized that we resolved all minor issues during the review of previous versions of the text of dissertation. And on the other hand, I assume that the other members of this committee, guided by their own expertise in the field, will cover or to spend the best conceptual topics. So I decided to ask Tara only one question that is not strictly related to individual differences themselves, but rather to one more general issue that interests me the most. That is ecological validity of the stimulus context that provokes emotional experiences and reactions. Namely, in order to achieve greatest possible plausibility, you use dynamic video stimuli, that is video clips, film clips. However, given the increasing use of VR technology in perceptual and cognitive studies, I wonder, what do you think would be the effect of virtual emotional situations on the perception of emotions and emotional responses in psychopaths, sadists, and the other bad guys? Of course, it would be ideal for the stimulation to be interactive and more personal, like in perceptual experiments, which is not technically impossible to create, although it may be ethically problematic to put people in the very strong and problematic, emotionally problematic situation. But here I'm only interested in your intuition about whether the pattern of hypothetical findings would be similar to that obtained in pictures and the films, as films are more is closer to our everyday experience, but not enough. When you look for instance at the smelly fish on the film, it is not the same as you have a dead fish on your table, which is dissolving.
Exactly.
in at the front of you.
So in general, you were asked.
Yes, it was my question. Yes.
So in general, you were asking whether something like VR would be better as a way to present stimuli. That's what. Well, I think definitely yes. Not only in this context of our study, but in general, when we're studying something from aesthetic experience to any emotional responses. We had talked a long time ago that we always say that when we try to induce emotions, it's basically inducing a representation of emotion. It's like some quasi-emotional experience. It's not exact experience you would induce if you would really be in a situation. But I think that using VR or even AR, so you have virtual reality and you have augmented reality.
Augmented, yes.
Augmented, where you see objects in space, and also VR might be interesting. I think that would definitely be closer to reality, more ecological, I think. Not only in this case, but in general, when we study anything that's regarding inducing emotion. And Janko, maybe you can try that with convicts. Yeah, but I do think that would be more. It would elicit stronger responses. I think yes, especially compared to the video clips, the types of videos we use. Especially, yes. So my answer is yes.
Yes.
It would be better.
Yes, I can only imagine psychopaths in VR. It is
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that it would be. I think it would be generally better to use it. Any of us, regardless of if you study dark traits or anything else, as we said, aesthetic experience, anything. I think VR or AR would be a good way to go.
Yes, I'm asking whether you think that virtual reality would be more discriminative for individual differences, not only.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do think, because if you have something that will induce maybe greater range of emotions, greater variance in responses, then that's better. So I think that is a nice way to do it. One way to do it.
Yes, I was thinking when I was reading the experimental design that the virtual reality settings would be more exciting for sadists. They are not satisfied with some pictures of people who are suffering or something like that. But when you have a more natural contact with the object, and when you are pressed with the situation, when you are have a impression that you are actor, that it will be more how to say discriminative for the research question for variables that you are employing.
Yeah, that's sense of agency.
It was just my
yeah, sense of agency, sense of you are the actor in the situation. Yeah, that I think would be great.
Okay, thank you. That's it. That's for me.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm the last one standing, so I will take over now. Yeah, I also, like, some of the questions that I meant to ask were already covered, and also you were praised but not enough. So I will just start with a brief praise of your thesis, and also the way you presented the results and the way you are basically handling this discussion altogether. So you built an expertise in the domain apart from the genuine interest that you've been harboring for years, and that's really, like, you can see both things, like both passion and expertise, and that's really great. So I also liked the honesty with which you reported the results. It might be even too much, and now even, like, you are very fast to, you know, be critical of everything you did. I think you need to, I mean, it's such a huge job, and I think the amount of data is really vast, and like all the other members of the committee already told you, like, you should be proud of yourself. So just, you know, be more transparent when it comes to that. Like, huge work, really valid and substantial data. And I think there is a lot to learn basically from it, in spite of the flaws. Like every data set we gather, and it always has flaws. So that's like my overall impression is that. And like we already covered the idea of those implicit measures that I wanted to discuss with you. And I also sent you 2 rounds of comments in which I basically told you, like, the details that I see and the issues that I already have with the methodology. So as others already said, this is a very healthy young female sample with very restricted variance of the variables, of your core variables. So I don't even think if it's fair to call them sadism and psychopathy basically, as they are so very low. Like, that's, even though you capture some variance, but you know it. Yeah. Which pole of the continuum is that? It's like that is something that we need to always have in mind, the context of this interpretation. So that's something that I just wanted to stress out. And then I have 2 like minor things that you can briefly discuss. First of all, like, okay, the implicit measures seem not to work. They do not capture stable individual tendencies, and the reason we introduce them, and we typically introduce them in the design, is because we fear that explicit ones wouldn't be so sensitive. They would be skewed because of the, you know, self-desirability issues and so on. But then again, with your explicit measure, you do have some discriminativity, and you do have people who differ in their self-reports when it comes to their emotional experience when exposed to violence. How do you basically, what's your take on this?
As a contrast between implicit measure and
yeah, because you introduced this very complex measure because you feared that you won't capture the, you know, enough variability in explicit ones, and then the results do not tell you that. The pattern is basically the opposite.
Well, I wasn't fearing that I wouldn't capture. That wasn't the motive. It was more to replicate and see. Replicate. It wouldn't be replication because, Janko, as I recall, you used IAT in inmates, right?
So I actually wanted, or
We wanted to see how this would work, and how this methodology would pan out in we can say general population. It's not general population, not even community sample, student sample. That is one of the reasons why we want it. So as Janko wants to apply some measures to convex now, that's how we actually wanted to use implicit measure in this sample. That's one of the reasons. But if I'm asking why I think we didn't get any differences, did you want to ask me that?
Well, basically, you did get some variance in their explicit self-reports on their emotional responses to violence, right? And in my understanding, the main reason why we introduced the whole indirect paradigm of measurement is because we fear people would, wouldn't tell us how they actually feel when it comes to sensitive topics like this, right? And then it seems that they still do, and that those measures are still more reliable than the implicit ones. So like, what's the take-home message for future researching when it comes to this? Or you would still keep open door for implicit measures?
If there is room for it, I would.
Okay.
But I think that maybe in this particular topic, we are the authors that also used IAT before in violent offenders. They were also speculating on what's the actual
thing that we are measuring.
Are we measuring responses to violence? Or they even mentioned that it might be an assessment of present danger of the situation. They even speculated that the scores from IAT, that basically they give us, when they did it on convicts, when they related,
When they,
just a second, I will tell you, Snowden.
I think, yeah.
They even speculated that or basically that, are you measuring some attitude towards violence? That's one thing that I, from this study, our study, that I can't really say. It's open for speculation. What do we, where with explicit measures, even though they're very plain, let's say, it is what it is. It's you measuring
their response. Maybe that's not
ecologically valid, so to speak, but it's still measuring their response too. Whereas with implicit measure, I'm not certain still what it captures.
Sure. Yeah, there are huge issues with construct validity. So and like they're also not sensitive enough. So I would rethink their place in this paradigm. Even if I used to use them within attitude measures a lot, they seem to make more sense there. But even then, those are the questions we need to ask, like, what are we actually measuring? And that I think it's important to revisit that from time to time. And then there's this one also small methodological issues in daily reconstruction study 2. You measure the emotional hurt in others, perceived emotional hurt in others, and I see some circularity in that when it comes to its relationship to sadism, because sadists, you might expect them to be less sensitive or more sensitive to emotional hurt in others, but they would also be the ones who cause it more. So there's this basically causal chain that's circular. So I don't know how the plain regression that we got could be interpreted in that sense, you know. So I would be careful in interpreting only one way. Like, so the high correlation that we obtained is basically the cause of it is them being more sensitive to it, right? Because in all behavioral measures that we obtain, even in that VR paradigm that you seem passionate about, they're way more noisy because you interact with your environment, and then you know the environment that you shape comes back to you. So in that way, there's this interaction that is hard to capture with our limited measurement tools that we do have. So I would still have that in mind. Do we have tools to grasp with this complexity? I mean, I know that you say like plain self-report measures are not really sexy, and they're like, you know, they seem to be too direct and so on, but in some parts they do the work. So I wouldn't dismiss them so easily. That's, you know, my take on this.
Me neither. But when it comes to this emotional hurt, in general, in this study, when it comes to the diamonds items that we used, and also the variables we introduced, like emotional hurt, that you can't disentangle what comes from what, and you can't, as I said, and as you said, you can't actually say whether that individual was the cause of the hurt, and therefore they are also noticing it, or some other factor is involved. That actually is very hard to detangle in this case. And also with diamonds items, also is very hard. And I didn't actually think in advance on maybe to change the phrasing to be more applicable to dark traits. A sense of agency, as Fiona said, regarding the VR, where you know you are the one that is causing certain changes in behavior in people and so on. In this study, particularly the second study, we didn't have any of that. It was very neutral. So you actually can't draw much from it, including that measure of emotional hurt. It was just one statement, yeah. But I agree. But I prefer if in the future, although the day reconstruction is very interesting because it's everyday experience. I always am a fan of experimental studies. If it would be possible to do like Buckles did with bug crushing and so on. So paradigms like that, I'm a fan of, and I think that although they're hard to conduct, I think it would be interesting to do them, to expand on that more in this field, I think.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Okay, there's only one more thing that I would like you to briefly just reflect on. So the pattern of results that you obtain throughout, I would say, is decreased negative emotions versus increased positive emotions to violent stimuli, and that's basically the cutoff between the two constructs of psychopathy and sadism. Do you agree on that?
I wouldn't say it's a cutoff.
I mean, okay, maybe that's not the right word, but like what actually differentiates the responses is, on one hand, you have lack of positive, lack of negative, and on the other hand, the increase of positive emotions to violent stimuli. So how?
No, you go.
No. What does it actually tell us? Does it go with your main hypothesis that psychopathic individuals view violence more instrumentally than sadists who gain pleasure from it, or does it tell us something else? How would you interpret that particular pattern of data?
Well, first I would say that this whole thing is more vicarious in nature. So we're more looking at how they respond when they're observing something.
Yeah.
We are not, that's the main thing. Why I think we should have some more practical experimental studies, that you don't have an individual actively pursuing a sadistic behavior.
I mean, you don't have to. Their reactions to what they perceive, it makes complete sense to me. Like the way you designed it also is plausible to test, right?
It is, but I would prefer, because you also have differences between vicarious sadism and core sadism. So observing, I excluded vicarious, I mean, it's too much, so I excluded it from here, but observing individuals in pain is also like watching MMA. So, and watching MMA is something that they also associate with vicarious sadism. So you're enjoying passively through other suffering. You're not actively inflicting damage on someone. Whereas core sadistic feature is inflicting, like your coworker torturing you with I don't know what, and gaining pleasure from it. So that's one thing. But when you, I divert. When you talk about the main pattern here is that sadistic individuals that have increased sadistic trait have positive response to violence. That's the basic thing. And as Janko said, some psychopathic traits act differently depending on, they have different patterns. But in general, I think that in psychopathy, the main pattern, in contrast with sadism, is that greater tolerance to violence. Basically, you have decreased negative emotions.
Right, yes.
To violence. Yes, that's basically that. So they have greater tolerance, but they are careless. They will not obtain pleasure from observing something. They might obtain pleasure from achieving their goal, from knowing that they cheated you, and they will just do what they want, but not looking at you suffering, unless that's their a part of fulfillment of their goal. That's at least my understanding.
Yeah, so it goes well with your like key hypothesis, I would say, right? So
I would say yes. Although I have to say that
there are many different relations, and so, but that's I think the most.
And the construct, especially psychopathy, I'm with Janko there, that it's problematic to treat it as a single construct, and that adds complexity to the whole idea of differentiating between the two, right? Yeah, okay, so we're believe it or not, we are nearing the end, so I would just give floor to Goran. You can share your experiences of working with Tara, and maybe close with some of your insights.
First, I want to tell some general observations about the thesis. So I would point several elements. First of all, it is very thorough literature review. I think it is impressive, it is detailed. Then what I want also to stress is the technical expertise in say, dealing with all these measures, emotion perception measures, and SPF, in terms of constructing all of these scoring, scoring syntaxes, basically programs to do it properly. And it is a lot of work. It is really unbelievable amount of work. Then I would also emphasize this fact that she used so many analysis, from correlation analysis to analysis of variance regression, even canonical correlation analysis, multi-level modeling. It is impressive kind of repertoire of statistical knowledge displayed by Tara. And finally, highly scrutinized statements, comments, interpretations, conclusions. very strict, good, always with some kind of critical, discussing critical issues and possible different interpretations and things like that. So it is very overall impressive thesis, and I completely agree with all people, with all of you who discussed these issues previously, and with Professor Chabrol's observation that it is so complex, you know, and you have to Tara extracted so much information, and she managed very nicely to deal with that complexity and to draw some conclusions. What I want to ask Tara, I think it is done very good, very decent kind of job. But I want to ask Tara actually 3 questions. First one is, so what is the result that you consider most reliable and robust and generalizable through different kind of samples, methods of assessment? So what is the nicest result you have? Maybe you have already discussed it, pointing to the difference between psychopathy and sadism in relation to emotional processing and emotional perception, but maybe it is something else. So basically, this is one question. Even more interesting to me is the second one. So basically, what we can see in combining all of this data, and in that I will start with the observation that still the second study is pretty informative in that sense. You see, for instance, sadism assumes say enjoyment in cruelty, enjoyment in the suffering of others. And this is the reason why we suppose that they are good in detecting negative emotions, to have high negative emotion accuracy. But having in mind study 2, you say you found relations between sadism and not only negative interpretation of the situation, but with their own negative emotions.
Yeah.
Both things. So it could be also that sadists are better in recognizing negative emotions because they are predominantly in that kind of experience. So it is easy for them to recognize it in others. And basically, it could be connected to both things. So easiness with recognizing negative emotions and sadism could be related to neuroticism or disintegration. And maybe if we introduce some other personality traits, some of these correlations will be even lower or maybe totally disappear. So my question is, second year, how many effects would remain if we controlled for all other basic personality traits? And finally, third, how many effects would remain if we control for intelligence? Because we know, although emotion perception is a different domain, it is not captured by current taxonomies of intelligence, but there are still correlations between being good in emotion recognition and emotion perception and having higher intelligence. And it is also systematic but low negative correlation between intelligence and psychoticism and sadism. So if we control for intelligence, would we obtain a little bit more, less correlations that we have obtained? This is speculation, of course, but I'm curious. So remember all 3 questions. So first, what is the most impressive and generalizable result? What if we control for personality? What if we control for intelligence?
Okay, I'll start with the third. So
Intelligence, what will be left? I think there will be some specificity left, but especially regarding these tasks that we use for emotion perception, Oliver Wilhelm did a study with psychopathy, with these perception tasks, and they do even more serious work because they use their batteries of tasks.
And they also included general intelligence, and they concluded that most of the,
when controlling for that ability, you don't have much left.
I mean, when it comes to
Emotion perception, it could be explained by
general ability. That's what their study did, and they used the same type of tasks we used because we are using their tasks, basically. So based on that, I might not say that it would be totally gone, but I think that including general intelligence
would definitely
take a lot from it, for sure.
What about personality?
Especially based on their findings. Personality, well, I will say I did that a long time ago, but I did find certain even overlaps, correlation between disintegration and sadism. We will look at those in the near future.
But I do think that even basic personality traits like
let's say it depends what we include.
If we include the Hexaco,
for example, or
the Big Five, whatever. I definitely think that it would take a certain amount of variance.
But I do think that there is some incremental value in dark traits. Okay. I do think, even though they do,
they can be mapped
to a certain degree
with basic personality traits.
So definitely we would see less of the variance explained by, but considering what we did and the small effects, maybe they would disappear or fall onto the basic personality. But if Janko would do that with convicts, I don't think
that basic traits would be enough to explain it. I think that you have some value in
measures of psychopathy and sadism too. I'm convinced. And the first or the last is the most robust finding. But are you asking about most robust
within my study or most robust? I mean, regarding my study together with all the
your study, what you found and you expect to find on any sample by using any methodology to assess
one
emotion.
Finding. Can I choose one? Only one?
Whatever you like.
For sure, I think that we would for sure find the positive responses to violence in sadistic individuals. Whether we observe as a trait, enhanced trait, or maybe clinical or forensic population with extreme levels, but I think that's something that connects them all. I think that's so greater positive emotions to violence. I think that would be
replicated in different types of stimuli methodology. I think
and samples for sure. Because I think that's the core of sadistic experience.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so in technical terms, we would need to somehow form a group. Tara, could you maybe put us in a breakout room, 5 of us, so we can just briefly discuss your defense and then come back?
She's a host.
Yeah, she's a host, yeah.
I can make some of you a host. Wait, make a host.
But
okay. Yeah, Professor, yes, since you know this the best, I'm sure, I'm making you the host.
Okay, but
I can put in waiting room. Okay. So how do I do? I put all of you separately in a waiting room.
No, don't put us in the waiting room. That doesn't do it. Do you have a breakout room option? Maybe you don't because it's a free
Why don't you?
Okay, I have you on the headset. Why don't I just leave? Maybe that's easier. I wouldn't be able to hear you or see you.
Well, yeah, that's also an option, and come back in like, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Okay. Tara, I just wanted to ask you several times, but never happened to ask this question. Did you record it?
Yes, this I
Perfect.
did.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I hope it will be saved, but I can pause now when you start debating if you want. You just tell me if I can leave the room. I have another room there, but somebody will have to notify me once I come back.
Keep recording and just go away a little bit. Yeah.
No, it doesn't make sense to record our private conversation.
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
Why not?
The idea is for it to be private. I don't think we'll have much to discuss.
Okay, we can
procedure.
Tara, we can message you when we finish our.
Yeah, message me. I can pause the recording, so I can just continue recording when I come back.
And we'll message you when you need to come back, and it will be in very short amount of time.
Yes, don't go to the beach, but stay close.
I won't. Okay, I'm pausing.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
After a very brief discussion, we all agreed, that your thesis was excellent and that you are now a PhD holder in psychology. And I don't know actually what that will bring you in life, but it's a title that you earned. So we're very happy for you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You have the recording, so you can share it. And maybe you, Gordon, as a supervisor, have something to add.
Now you can change the title on your door in Dr. Bulut.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, email signature. You have to add it everywhere.
Oh no.
Tara Bulut, PhD, Dr. Bulut, whatever you prefer.
Yeah.
Both. Dr. Tara Bulut, PhD.
Understand. The only words is the oath.
Yep. So I don't know about the technicalities. We need to sign that, but you will go and you will take care of that and let us know, right?
Okay. Yeah. I think that Maya told me, our secretary, that I should just evidence that we had online defense, and I'm not sure what will happen with these signatures, but I will tell you if you need signatures.
Okay. You need to add the electronic signatures or whatever. You just let us know.
That you have recorded that,
And she also has my grade book or indexing.
That's with
also here. Yeah.
Yeah, she has that. Okay. I will ask I will ask her if I have to do anything else for the procedure.
Okay, so you can open that whatever bottle of wine or
and celebrate.
Having stash. Time for that.
I will, and I will see you in a couple of months when.
Yes, and we will do the same in our. We will also do the same in our apartments.
No, we will celebrate when I visit. When I visit in a couple of months, we'll celebrate together.
Okay.
When, everything dies down a little.
Thank you, Professor Shabrola, a lot for being a part of this.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to this excellent thesis.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you all. See you soon.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.